Time for another episode of the Thought Project, just so you know. And today we're going to be starting out with a new song by Corey Feldman, which is Deceptive Deborah. I'll tell you who I think it's actually about after we listen to some of it. But I haven't heard a song from Corey Feldman in like decades. He even got like a Halloween cover too on YouTube. Sounds like Michael Jackson, right? It's like 1986, 97 Michael Jackson style music. Like, what is going on?
Walking down the street holding somebody's hand. They thought that she was walking with you. When they approached, my boys found his shotgun. The dude he was with was not you. You sat her down, looked straight in the eyes, and said, "Woman, why you lying on me? She thought you wouldn't find out."
The Okay, that's only halfway through the song. So we'll put into that. Okay, so if you remember, Corey Feldman was a really popular actor in the 80s and early 90s, and he's had a history in the media of talking about some of his personal experiences. I'm going to tell you right now who I think the song is actually about, because there is a Deborah from that time period that he would have known, and that would be Deborah Gibson. But she went by the name Debbie Gibson, right? Remember Electric Youth? Yeah, I think that's who the song is actually about. I don't know why it's out now, but it is out now. So it literally was just put up on YouTube like within 13 days. Yeah, 13 days ago. So it's by the Orchard Enterprises, whoever that is. So anyways, you have to get into some more important, serious news right now, actually, which is that essentially Representative Speaker Kevin McCarthy yesterday announced that he has 3 House committees organized for an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. So they are starting impeachment inquiry proceedings within the U.S. House. I know it's really confusing because there's all these processes and committees that things go through, but it's pretty serious when you have 3 full committees, not subcommittees, but 3 full committees actually designated to work on that impeachment. And so what you're going to want to do is look up those 3 committees and then look up their activities, and you'll see what's happening as far as the impeachment process for President Biden. So that's how that works as far as the legislation of the U.S. House. It's also important to note that reserve rates are higher than expected for the Federal Reserve over the past month. The news was released yesterday, and there's been some talk of them possibly being stymied by the Federal Reserve later in the year, but that's only like 1 or 2 sources I've seen on. I've seen more reports just saying they're going to be up, but they're also expected to be up. The stock market, S&P 500 went up 0.3%. The NASDAQ Dow Jones Industrial was up 58 points, or 0.2%, and it was up 0.3%. Yeah, I would say the NASDAQ is up 0.3% and the Dow Jones is up 0.2%. And then I saw an article on the Federal Reserve. I saw one really solid article where I believe the source saying they might possibly cut rates later this year. I wouldn't count on it. You also have to note that the FDA has signed off on a new vaccine for COVID-19, and those vaccines should be rolling out pretty quickly here, so you can go look for them. Find out when your local supplier is going to have them. if you want. I know I'm gonna get one. So I've been getting them ever since the pandemic started. But I also had COVID even before I could get my booster. So what are you gonna do? Anyways, it's important to note that I want to go back in time a little bit to something to 2012, which is that this has to do with Cersei and Wilhelm, so you understand how much impact they've had on the country and some of the setups they've done with Patricia and Dan and maybe even Karen. But there was a story about Mitt Romney that was fake that was put into, I think it was the Boston Globe, like when he was running years ago for office to be governor in Massachusetts, that he put his dog on top of his car and that all this diarrhea ran out of the car and the dog was just miserable and abused. It's a completely false story. It was proven to be false. I researched it myself. It's not a true story. The other thing is, and this goes back to literally 2012, is that there was a story and footage released of a woman very angrily attacking and complaining that his business partner in his old law firm, so another lawyer and business partner, had not treated her well in divorce, and she was on TV being really hostile and protesting other women. It wasn't the man's actual ex-wife. So it turned out it was actually Cersei, who lives in Pennsylvania still today. So she was up on TV falsely pretending to be the guy's ex-wife, stirring up trouble, pretending like it somehow was tangentially related to Mitt Romney, when the fact of the matter is it's like an issue with an ex-wife and a business partner and has like nothing to do with her. So the point is that there was literal federal evidence there, because that media went all over the country, maybe the world, of this woman complaining. It turns out it was actually Cersei, and it wasn't even the man's actual ex-wife. So not only was she putting out false allegations and false material in the media against Mitt Romney and his campaign by this tangential relationship and accusations about this partner of his, but it wasn't even the ex-wife that was involved. So she was actually also attacking the ex-wife. I mean, could you imagine being an ex-wife and you're at home or busy working and there's some crazy chick pretending to be you on TV, acting like you're complaining when you're actually not? Because that's what Cersei has been doing, and she is part of the KGB FSB. This is why you have to be careful about the media, because sometimes they're saying people are mad and having fights, and they're not. And she was very clearly caught for that. It's probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen, but it was also horrible. It's only funny in the most grotesque sense of, like, this woman got caught and it's completely stupid. But the scary part is that media went out and people might have believed it. So I'm sorry if you saw the footage and thought it had anything to do with him. That woman was actually Cersei. That's not a real person. I mean, as far as, like, the actual ex-wife, that was a fake. So, just know your information. I also have to sadly share that Senator Mitt Romney announced yesterday that he is not going to run for a second term in the Senate. I think it's a really smart decision because he is getting older. He said he didn't think it would be, as productive or as good, and he's probably right. There's a tendency for some of these senators to stay around too long and to end up actually not having productive, good terms because they are getting older. And it is fun to be in the Senate, but it's also really unproductive to be there when you become too old to actually do a good job and to really be part of things and make a difference. He also noted that with the way Congress had become, the situations politically in the D.C. area and the way that the government is running, that he didn't feel like he could accomplish as much and was no longer happy trying to be in the position. And he also said that he didn't think President Biden was actually able to do or take the actions necessary to be a good president. He thinks Donald Trump is not actually willing to do it or doesn't care. I'm fairly convinced that Donald Trump has just had it. He got into so many fights with Russia and with Russian activity and so many dumb setups that I think he's just been doing what he had to do for his family and himself. And if you had seen what has happened to some of these women, like Patricia, Dan, Cersei, and Wilhelm have gotten to, I saw the two women in the hospital in Charlottesville that were missing limbs and had permanent brain damage, and one decided to exercise her right to die. If you've ever seen that, and what that comes from and how that works and the setups around that, which Donald Trump is aware of, you too would be acting really crazy and getting on TV and trying to run for president or do whatever you could to stop that, especially if it was your own daughter and children and wife and ex-wife being targeted, okay? So I think the guy actually is a little bit out there, but I also think that he's also somebody who's been desperately trying to protect his family. And that's kind of important to know about him because he didn't want his kids sent into those kind of situations. He didn't want to see them, put through a car wreck or something weird that had been set up with Russian signet systems, missing arm and legs, which is what he's been being threatened with. It isn't actually just his life. It's actually the kids. So I'm going to take this out now. In the last episode, I didn't because it was a 9/11 episode, but we have to take this out today. And it's important that it's Buffalo Bill, specifically, who likes to do those setups. And he really was named for the character in Silence of the Lambs. It's the exact same type of guy. He's gotten more sophisticated about it, but I saw him down in Charlottesville. I saw him once up in Saginaw. Saginaw had problems with their entire court system. Talking about Saginaw, Michigan, had problems with their entire court system being messed up. So, I don't know. You up to Saginaw, Frankenmuth, it's up to you. But not that I know he's up there and they have problems with their court systems. They at least got a hold of it. Got tracked out. Got that sort of tracked it and got control of it in this state. But in Virginia, Buffalo Bill has had a fantastic time hurting people and getting them injured. And Dan has also gone completely to town, attacking, raping women, and they've also done it out in California. Patricia as well, Karen, Cersei Wilhelm. They've had a lot of fun torturing and maiming people. And it's important to note that they've been involved with both the two major agencies out in Hollywood. And CIA is one of those, which was why I say CIA was part of the problem. I finally realized that some of the issues I was having with Buffalo Bill was that some of the people at CIA that were claiming lying to be an Indian intel, and they weren't. So it actually took people who were actually in intel, whether from India or the U.S., to be like, no, 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 we know you're not actually in intel. You work at CIA, and you're actually violating this woman, and she doesn't even have a contract with you. And this whole thing is going to be put, to an end. And of course, you had the further developments with the UK's laws on anti-slavery and the Modern Slavery Act. You also had developments with K-pop and the Koreans actually purchasing the other agency, the Kendricks ad. So they've actually purchased a big chunk of it and own it now. And that's changed the game entirely too. So all this is just information to understand about how this stuff kind of pulls together, because you're talking about geopolitics and it gets really big and headachy. And you've got a very small short list of people that are actually here in the U.S. that are the problem. And the U.S. government is like, we're going to go to China, attack China. Well, you might want to start with the short list of people you got right here, because they're pretty clearly directly tied to Lahaina and Hawaii. Do that. Seriously. And I need to go into something else here. Let's see if I can get into this today. The idea that 9/11 was an inside job is a false narrative. It was very clearly planned by Russia, KGB, FSB operatives in the U.S. and allowed. But it was also that there were so many Russian operatives in the Middle East stirring up problems and dissension, fighting and training and, directing people from those countries to attack us. And the people in those countries don't really understand signet systems very well in a lot of cases. And I won't believe anyone who said they did, because I've seen two people get confused by them here in the U.S. So, the Russians have done a really good job of that, even if they aren't very good at actually fighting. So you have to remember that. That isn't really was an inside job. It was that we had problems with operatives here in the U.S. or part of those organizations. I also need to note that Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall said on Wednesday that China is America's preeminent security threat, and that the U.S. Air Force and Space Force need to modernize to stop the threat. I thought we were doing that. But, I'm not big on anybody that just wants to spend more money or just wants to go over there when you've got a bunch of people right here in the country that actually need to be put in prison or even possibly executed. They have to be restrained somehow because of their behavior. So that's the biggest thing. Let's go back through a few more other things here. So we're going to talk about some demographics for the show. My audience is now at 25 to 34 years is 29%, 35 to 44 years is 30%, 45 to 54 years is 7%. The gender of the show is 78% male, 20% female is how they're self-identifying, and right now it's a lot of traffic from the United States, Canada, and Brazil. Also, I need to note, just as part of business, general business, I am now in the Fab Over 40 contest, which is super cute, and I really appreciate the honor of being included in it. I think that's really super nice. If I win it, I'll be featured in New Beauty magazine, and I will give you an opportunity to vote for it when it comes up. My voting doesn't actually start until October, even though I announced it over social media yesterday. So now if you see a little blurb for it that I'm in the contest. So it's just fun stuff. So, and it also is going to partially benefit the National Breast Cancer Foundation as well. We need to come back around to this. We were talking about Beyonce and how she's got in trouble for copying people. One issue I think for her is that Buffalo Bill got into her concert and her series, and so he set her up a lot this year and took a lot of material from me that I didn't get paid for. So she's been on tour, and then she did a bunch of stuff for Tiffany's that was also stolen by other people. And I don't really understand any of it anymore, because it just seemed like there was so much maliciousness involved that they would steal that much material for her, not pay me, and then Dan has even admitted that she really wasn't responsible, that they've actually stolen the material. And I'm not saying that to protect her, but she needs to know what she's doing and get away from Buffalo Bill and Dan and Patricia. Like, stop working with them, because they're stealing material from people. And they've set her up pretty heavily on this tour, and it's a little scary. So, there's just too much that they took from me to use for a couple of her tours, and then Tiffany's ads, designs they put on the clothing. Like, it's just too much. It's too much of a setup on somebody that I don't think is actually responsible for it. So it's definitely a problem with Buffalo Bill, Cersei, Wilhelm, Patricia, Dan, saying, "Oh, it's that way." No, honey, it's all of them. They all do it. Actually, I don't know that Wilhelm actually has, or even Cersei on that. They were pretty clearly involved with J Lo and Taylor Swift, but Beyonce definitely has been getting material from Buffalo Bill and Dan that they've stolen from me, and so like years ago, over a decade ago, to use even now. So that's not good. Everybody needs to do their own work and all their creative work, and I need to pay for it. And there's nothing more important as a business administrator of any kind. You can't afford to be narcissistic and just let somebody who is a borderline or a psychopath or whatever into your business and ruin your business processes and give themselves more money that belongs to somebody else, because that will absolutely destroy your business. There's no way around it. And I've seen it with Kendrick because he told me years ago, this was over 20 years ago, he told me there was a bunch of setups, and if he was ever brought back to see me in any situation, to know that there was just going to be another bazaar set up with crazy borderline people claiming that I was supposed to pay money to be married to him when nobody pays money to be married to anyone in the U.S. and is simply undone, and you don't have the right to demand that somebody do that, especially the man who is considered married to someone else. And it's important to know that he was put through a setup at Luther College. I think it was a setup with a person who was extremely aggressive at a man, but as a child posed, so it looked like he was having sex with a kid in public. Well, the school just let the whole thing roll and happen because Patricia, Dan, Cersei, Wilhelm, Karen were all there and around. So you've got a definite problem with some of these people just being out of control. And there's even been to the point that it's appeared that the current spouse is actually someone who blackmailed him into the marriage and very clearly works with drug dealers out of Peru and China, and had said, repeatedly, he was a pedophile and had to be punished for it, when I'm pretty sure the guy actually has done some time for it, for whatever small events have happened. And I'm just saying this here publicly, that people need to know that he actually warned me about that, so don't even bother. And, unfortunately, I have to say this for him as much as anybody else. Do you think it's really acceptable to the U.S. government or anybody at the Department of Labor or other organizations where I'm just say, don't worry, I might have to come back sometimes, but please just don't fall for this and just get away from it? Do you think that's really acceptable for him to keep coming back? No. And it actually looks like on some level that he actually had wanted to really be with me instead of the marriages he claims he was forced into. And I don't even know if those were actual marriages, because both those women are legal immigrants, but I don't think he's a legal immigrant either. And so you're looking at this overly complicates the situation. Plus, there's the fact that he complained twice to the U.S. government and threw fits at his adult about having wanted to get married to me, and then twice went off and married other women or men. I think the second spouse is actually a man who he would call his third spouse, and is actually, technically, legally, as far as anyone knows, only the second spouse. But the point is, he spent a lot of time protesting, and then he allowed Buffalo Bill and Dan to tell him that he had to be married to these other people when he may not actually want to be. And that makes it appear that he's just mentally ill and insane, and that's what a lot of people came to the conclusion of, even his own business associates. They decided that he was actually insane, because he clearly could have just simply married me and told these people to go away, and he didn't. And he went through all the setups, and he made a lot of money off of it, and he's never paid me for all the money and work that was taken. So that's a big problem, too. And you also have to consider the reality that he was kooky enough to tell me that he was going to go ahead and go into that third marriage with what is now considered a second spouse legally in the U.S., as far as I know legally. And, certainly listed legally that way on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not really that accurate. But the point is that he had said he was going to do, there was some movie years ago with this guy that married 3 different women, and he worked the first wife really hard. In the end, she gets a settlement in court. The third wife is supposed to be the one he really loves and is crazy about, and he's going to have this perfect life with her as this reformed man who's no longer running the streets. I can't remember what it was called, but Vivica Fox is in it. And I told his face, I said, it's not going to work out to try and do that with the third woman or man, your second, what is now considered second spouse. That's ridiculous. And if you listen to people who work in the U.S. government who know these issues, they're tired of it, the answer is no, and that's going to be big H-E-L-L, no. That's not going to work. You're not going to ride into the sunset with this spouse and leave the rest of us hanging on all these issues after what happened in Lahana and all these other problems, and certainly not with that amount of money that's taken from me. I am not interested in anyone being forced to marry me or not marry or whatever. I'm interested in legal employment, and I need to be paid for all my work. So that's what it comes down to for pretty much everybody involved. It really is about legal employment work. Nobody's interested in forcing people into relationships they want to be in, even though apparently Kendrick is completely heartbroken because he's been forced into yet another marriage he didn't want. Oh, well, he told me he was going to do it years ago, and I was kind of fed up with him back then, and my answer is still that other people said he was insane for it all, and I would agree. I think he has narcissistic personality disorder as diagnosed. back in the Washington, D.C. area by a number of people involved with HHS. And that's all I can say about that, because I've just learned how to interact with them better when I do run into them. And unfortunately, I have run into them a few times in the last year. So, that's all been said. I'm going to finish up the show, and I'm going to go ahead and karaoke Vanessa Williams' song, Save the Best for Last. Uh-oh. Hold on a second. I didn't key that up right. I have to play this here. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha. Do you remember that? I gotta run through a commercial here, and I don't want y'all to hear it. Okay. I think we got this. I mean, the big thing for me is that I just try to get along with people and be as amiable as possible, and I focus on legal employment. Legal employment, and I don't work for free, and I don't work on projects for other people anymore, and there's a whole bunch of people that owe me money. That's kind of about it. Didn't pay me for the work in the past. We're dunsies. You at the end, you're definitely still going to owe them money. You don't get to ask for anything more. In fact, all you get to ask for is the right to actually just pay me the money that's owed. That's pretty much about it. Holy. This thing, Save the Best for Last, was originally performed by Vanessa Williams. Sometimes the snow comes down in June. Sometimes the sun goes round the moon. I see the passion in your eyes. Sometimes it's all a big surprise. 'Cause there was a time when all I did was wish you tell me this was love. It's not the way I hoped or how I planned, but somehow it's enough. We're standing face to face. Isn't this world a crazy place? Just when I thought our chance had passed, you go and save the best for last. All of the nights you came to me when some silly girl had set you free, you wondered how you'd make it through. I wondered what was wrong with you. 'Cause how could you give your love to someone else and share your dreams with me? 'Cause sometimes the very thing you're looking for is the one thing you can't see. Now we're standing face to face. Isn't this world a crazy place? It's when I thought our chance had passed, you go and save the best for last. Sometimes the very thing you're looking for is the one thing you can't see. Sometimes the snow comes down in June. Sometimes the sun goes round the moon. Just when I thought our chance had passed, you go and save the best for last. You went and saved the best for last. mind you, in the United States of America and in most modern countries, you cannot cite your religion, status, sexual orientation, whether you're trans. Actually, you really can't cite anything as an excuse for people to give you things for free and ask to labor traffic them. There are no excuses for it. Not in this country, and not in most of the other developed countries of the world. Just so you know. Have a good one. This has been the Thought Project, just so you know.